Black pregnant maid, forced to sing for Humiliation by Millionaire's wife. What happened shocked. All the rich bride, grinning cruelly, gestured to the pregnant maid in the corner of the room as the bridal hall grew silent. She told the hundreds of guests that my maid Emma will be performing a special performance for our next song. Emma felt compelled to take the platform, her face white with fear. She had no idea that her public humiliation would soon turn into her boss's downfall and the start of her biggest desire. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is, though, before we get into the whole story. Let's begin by subscribing to the channel. As she passed Emma in the corridor, Vanessa stated icily, "Just because you work here doesn't mean I have to look at you. Do your best to avoid my sight today." Emma Wilson stepped aside, one hand automatically going to her round belly as she lowered her eyes. Making herself inconspicuous in the expansive Westwood house became more difficult every day when she was 6 months pregnant. "Yes, Miss Clark," she muttered. Emma inhaled deeply and kept pushing her cleaning cart as Vanessa's footsteps faded down the marble corridor. Dust particles in the air were highlighted by the early sunlight shining through tall windows. She would have to get rid of them before Vanessa came back. Emma, who is 28 years old, had no intention of becoming a live-in maid. Once, instead of cleaning toilets in a house in Los Angeles, her hopes had focused on Nashville's music scene. However, when Jake Miller, a smooth-talking singer she briefly dated, vanished after finding out she was expecting his kid, life had other ideas. "There you are, Emma," said a kind voice behind her, as Antonio Diaz, the head chef, approached her with a kind grin. Like everything else he handled in the kitchen, his white outfit was immaculate. "I prepared additional breakfast." He handed her a plate of fruit, eggs, and toast and added, "You need to eat more." "You didn't have to do that, Antonio. Thank you." "Of course I did." He motioned toward her abdomen, saying, "You're eating for two now. How are you today?" "I'm tired," Emma said, "but okay. The wedding is only 2 days away. Then perhaps everything will settle down." Antonio's smile dimmed a little. Perhaps. They both understood that the new Mrs. Bennet would probably be considerably more demanding. Their 40-year-old boss, computer millionaire Richard Bennet, was getting married to Vanessa Clark, a former model from a wealthy New York family. Vanessa saw the employees as movable furniture, whereas Richard treated them with dignity. Emma took a quick mouthful of bread and remarked, "I had better finish the East Wing before she returns." As she left, Antonio called, "Take care of yourself." Emma's back hurt, but she persevered because she knew the overtime pay would help pay for the crib her baby would require. That baby needs a strong mama. Emma spent the morning dusting and vacuuming the East Wing of the mansion, where several guest rooms were being prepared for out-of-town wedding guests. She heard Vanessa's voice from a nearby room as she cleaned the third guest bathroom. Emma tried to work quietly by slowing down. "No, Julia. In that room," I shouted, "white roses, not pink. Do you intend to destroy everything?" The wedding designer, Julia Torres, who had been running in and out of the estate for weeks, was the second voice Emma recognized. "I apologize, Miss Clark." The florist must have... "I don't give a damn about justifications. Make it right. The cost of this wedding is $2 million. Vanessa's tone made Emma wince. It must be flawless. She pitied Julia, who appeared to be trying her hardest to oversee the extravagant occasion. Emma went to the bathroom and then out into the hall. She felt a severe pain in her back as she knelt down to pick up a fallen towel. Slowly, she straightened, supporting herself with one hand on the wall. Richard Bennet stood a few steps away, his face worried, and she was startled by the deep male voice asking, "Are you okay?" Richard usually saw when someone was having trouble, unlike Vanessa. "Yes, Mr. Bennet, only mild backache, nothing to be concerned about." Richard scowled. "Emma, you should take pauses when necessary. Your health comes first." He paused, as though he wanted to say more, but then nodded and went on down the hall. Emma watched him leave, appreciating his generosity. "Thank you, sir. I will." Emma sat in the staff area during her lunch break and contacted her doctor. Richard, who had built his company from nothing and made his fortune producing security software, looked every inch the successful businessman he was, complete with salt and pepper hair and glasses. The receptionist informed her that her appointment was confirmed for next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Doctor. Williams wants to do another ultrasound. Thank to you. As Emma noted on her phone calendar, I'll be there. Emma observed more activity in the mansion after lunch. More flowers were delivered by florists, Antonio and the caterers talked over the last meal items, and Vanessa's voice could be heard guiding everyone between the rooms. The front door opened, and a sweet, refined voice called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" Richard's mother, Margaret Bennett, came in with a tiny suitcase as Emma was cleaning the windows in the main living room. She wore a plain but pricey blue outfit, and her grey hair was combed flawlessly. "Emma, dear, how lovely to see you," Margaret responded with a sincere smile. "How are you feeling? The baby must be getting quite active now." "Yes, Mrs. Bennett, especially at night when I'm trying to sleep," Emma said, smiling back. Margaret had always been kind and respectful to Emma, unlike Vanessa, and she seemed to understand that events, not a lack of skills, had brought Emma to this position. "You're early, Mother," Richard exclaimed as he walked into the room and gave Margaret a hug. "I wanted to help with last-minute details," Margaret explained, "and make sure you're not having cold feet." Richard's face flashed something that made Emma think she was dreaming for a moment, but then he grinned. "No cold feet here." Later that afternoon, Emma worked in Richard's study, cleaning bookcases that contained business biographies and technological literature. In contrast to the wedding commotion in the rest of the home, the room felt serene. She hummed gently without thinking, a habit from her time playing in cafes in Nashville. She wrote the song about overcoming life's most difficult situations while she was at her lowest point following Jake's departure. Emma was so engrossed in the song that she failed to notice Richard walk in. He listened in silence in the doorway, his face serious. She jumped a little when she turned to see him. Emma felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, I didn't hear you come in. Please don't apologize," he murmured. "You have a beautiful voice, Emma." "I used to sing a lot before," she added, obliquely pointing to her current circumstances. "You should sing more," Richard said. "And a skill like that shouldn't be concealed." Neither of them saw Vanessa, who was observing their exchange with narrowed eyes from the corridor. As she saw Richard smile at Emma, her immaculately manicured nails drove into her palms. Vanessa called sharply, "Richard!" causing them to turn. "Your tuxedo showed up. You must try it on right away." "Of course," Richard replied. "Thank you again for your hard work, Emma." Emma went back to cleaning as he and Vanessa departed. Not realizing that her harmless humming had sowed a dangerous seed in Vanessa's thoughts, Emma assisted Antonio in plating the appetizers that evening while the workers prepared dinner. "2 more days of this wedding madness," Antonio muttered. "So that we can breathe again," Emma said. "I hope so. I need to start saving more for when the baby comes." Antonio nodded toward the dining room where they could hear Vanessa discussing seeding arrangements. "Be mindful of her." "Emma, what do you mean? Like you're a problem she wants to solve," Antonio remarked. "Because I don't like the way she looks at you." Emma heard Vanessa talking on the phone in the hallway as she carried water glasses to the dining table. "Just watch your back. Don't worry about the singer situation. I believe I've discovered the ideal solution to several issues at once." Emma kept walking, the words not seeming to matter as much. Emma was preparing for the rehearsal dinner at the Brentwood Country Club, and as she laid out the freshly pressed tablecloths, she kept thinking about the singer situation Vanessa had mentioned on the phone. She had no way of knowing that Vanessa's perfect solution would soon change her life forever. With her pregnant belly making the task more challenging than usual, Emma assisted the catering team in setting up trays of appetizers as the country club glowed with lights and staff hurried to get ready for the event. "You should sit down for a minute," one of the waiters said, observing Emma wince as she set down a tray. Emma rubbed her lower back and said, "I can't. There's too much to do." Vanessa, wearing a stylish blue dress, welcomed early comers across the room with a flawless grin as she introduced herself to Richard's business associates. She didn't even hint at the coldness Emma was so familiar with. She looked like the stunning bride-to-be. "Emma, could you repair the flower arrangement on table 3? The wedding coordinator, Julia Torres, hurried by with a clipboard and said, 'It's crooked.'" Emma went to the table after giving a nod. While she was rearranging the flowers, she noticed Richard introducing other visitors to an elderly woman. "This is my Aunt Helen, who travelled from Boston for the wedding," Richard added kindly. "Aunt Helen, this is Emma Wilson, the person who keeps our home running smoothly," Richard stated with sincere gratitude as he and his aunt approached Emma. "I'm glad to have met you," Emma responded courteously. "Richard informs me that you are expecting. When will the baby be born?" Helen politely inquired. "In roughly 3 months," Emma said, taken aback by the woman's curiosity. Richard grinned at the conversation before Vanessa came to his side and put her arm around his. "Well, make sure you're taking care of yourself, dear." "The Johnsons have just arrived, Richard. We should welcome them," Vanessa murmured, yanking him away without addressing Helen or Emma. At 7 o'clock, the rehearsal dinner started, and Emma, who was working in the background to assist the staff in serving the 5-course meal, could see Richard and Vanessa at the head table. Their engagement ring gleaming under the chandelier lights from her spot near the kitchen doors. When Julia's phone rang halfway through the main course, she moved away from the tables to answer it, and Emma saw the wedding planner's expression droop as she listened. As soon as Julia hung up, she hurried up to Vanessa and whispered in her ear, "Are you saying that she has laryngitis?" Over the dinner talk, Vanessa's voice could be heard. "The wedding is in 2 days." Guests turned to look as Vanessa's perfect composure cracked slightly. "I'm sorry about that, Miss Clark." From the doctor's office, she called, "She is incapable of speaking, much less singing," Julia clarified. "What are we going to do about our first dance?" "This is a disaster," Vanessa stated. The song was composed especially for her voice. Richard covered Vanessa's hand. "It's all right." "It's not the same," Vanessa said. As Margaret Bennett, who was sitting on Richard's opposite side, leaned closer, "We can use a recording instead. You know, I heard a really nice voice at your house not too long ago." "Who is that?" Richard said. "Your maid, Emma. One morning when she was hanging washing in the garden, I heard her singing. Her voice is lovely." Emma, who was replacing water glasses nearby, froze at the mention of her name. Vanessa's expression shifted from annoyance to something calculated. "Emma, our Emma." "Yes," Margaret went on, "it was a very natural gift, and rather stunning." A gradual smile appeared on Vanessa's lips as she looked at Emma across the room and said, "How interesting." After supper, Emma saw Vanessa beckon Julia into a tiny nook off the main dining area. "I didn't know." Julia kept shaking her head, and Vanessa spoke most of the time, giving the impression that their conversation was passionate. As she cleared plates from an adjacent table, Julia stated loudly enough for Emma to hear, "I don't think that's a good idea." Vanessa retorted, "I'm not asking for your opinion. Just make it happen." When Julia left, her expression was obviously uncomfortable, and she glanced at Emma for a moment before hurriedly averting her gaze. Richard's best friend and business partner, Michael Reed, came up to Emma while she was working. "I take it you're Emma?" Silently, he inquired. "Yes, sir." "How are you at the moment? Are you supposed to stand this much?" Emma was taken aback by his worry. "I'm all right. I require the hours." Michael gave a nod before lowering his voice. "Watch out for Vanessa. Something's not right." Before Emma could reply, Michael stepped aside and went toward Richard, who was standing there chatting with other guests. Emma watched from the other side of the room as Michael spoke to Richard, their conversation seeming serious. Richard shook his head and gave Michael a smiley shoulder pat, seemingly dismissing whatever issue had been brought up. Back at the mansion later that night, Emma tallied her tips for the evening, calculating out loud in her little room that she would need 6 more hours, like tonight, to cover the baby's bills. But she was still far from being able to purchase the crib she had seen at the store. Antonio was standing there with a plate of leftover dessert when she heard a knock on her door. "You missed the chocolate cake," he murmured, passing the platter to her. "It's good." "Thank you, Antonio." Emma accepted the platter with gratitude. Antonio stayed. Rather, he entered her room and half shut the door. "Tonight, I caught Vanessa chatting with her bridesmaids," he remarked. "They were giggling while observing you." "I'm not fond of it," Emma groaned. "It was more than that. She probably just finds it amusing that she has a pregnant maid working for her." "Be careful, Emma," they said, referring to the special surprise for the wedding and looking in your direction. Emma reflected on Vanessa's phone call and her response to Margaret's remark regarding Emma's singing. "Do you think it has anything to do with the wedding singer getting sick?" Emma inquired. Antonio's eyes got a little bigger. "Richard's mother said she once heard me sing, and Vanessa had this weird expression on her face." "What do you mean?" Antonio asked. "That doesn't sound good. Whatever she's planning, it's not to help you. Vanessa doesn't do nice things for people like us." Emma nodded, remembering Michael's warning as well. "I'll be careful." The following morning, Emma was washing the breakfast dishes when Vanessa came into the kitchen. She usually stayed away from the staff areas, so it was surprising to see her there. Vanessa began, "Good morning, Emma," with a smile that stopped short of her eyes. "Good morning, Miss Clark," Emma murmured warily. Leaning on the counter was Vanessa. "I hear you have a beautiful voice." Emma nearly dropped the plate she was washing. I sang a little once." "How humble," Vanessa said, observing her. "Our wedding vocalist has been ill, you know. What a shameful time." "I understand. I apologize." "Well, these things happen." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "I was thinking perhaps you could help us out if needed." Emma turned to face Vanessa, fully surprised by the request. "Me perform at your wedding?" Vanessa left the sentence hanging. "Just as a backup plan, of course. We are trying to find a professional replacement, but on such short notice. I am unsure, Miss Clark. It's been a while since I performed, but you could, wouldn't you? Richard would find it really meaningful. He has shown you such kindness throughout your circumstance." Vanessa looked at Emma's growing tummy. Emma was torn. "I suppose I could, if you really need help." Emma responded tentatively, acknowledging that Richard had shown her kindness and asking whether she could possibly return the favor. "Wonderful." Vanessa grinned widely. After Vanessa left, Emma called her friend Sarah in Nashville, saying, "She asked me to possibly sing at her wedding," saying, "I hope we find a replacement and don't need to bother you, but it's good to know we have a backup plan. She's never been kind to me before, so it seems odd. Perhaps she's finally seeing you as more than just the help," Sarah said. Emma didn't believe it, but she said, "Maybe." It might be a good opportunity, though. If I did well, Richard might suggest me to some of his friends in the music business. Just watch out, Sarah said. Emma saw Julia give her odd looks as they passed in the corridors throughout the day. It seems too fortuitous that their vocalist became sick soon after Richard's mum complimented your voice. She once overheard Vanessa whispering to her bridesmaids, and they all turned to look at Emma before giggling. As the last wedding preparations went on, Emma's anxiety grew. To be perceived as more than just a pregnant maid, she secretly hoped that this would be her moment to sing once more. That night, Emma heard Vanessa talking to Julia in the hallway while she assisted in getting the guest rooms ready for guests from out of town. "Everything is set up exactly as we agreed upon," Vanessa stated. "And tomorrow will be unforgettable for everyone." As Julia left, Emma saw the wedding planner's distressed expression. They looked at each other for a moment, and Julia's pitying expression made Emma shiver. There was a serious problem. The baby kicked as Emma dressed in her uniform, a simple black dress with a white apron that barely fit over her pregnant belly. But by tomorrow, it would be too late to stop whatever Vanessa had planned. Emma tossed and turned all night, troubled by the look of pity on Julia's face. When her alarm clock showed 5 o'clock in the morning, she gave up on sleep and got up to get ready for the wedding day. Emma put her palm on her stomach and muttered, "Today is going to be a long day for both of us." By 6 o'clock, the Brentwood Country Club was already bustling with activity. White rose arrangements were carried through the grand entrance by florists. Carts filled with food were wheeled in by catering staff. Photographers tested lighting around the site. Emma joined the kitchen crew, helping to set up silverware and unpack serving dishes. Every movement hurt her back, but she concentrated on the overtime pay. With every hour she worked, she got closer to being able to buy the crib her baby would require. Antonio remarked, "You shouldn't be carrying those," and swiftly removed a stack of dishes from Emma's grasp. "Here, I made a place for you." He guided her to a little kitchen nook where he had set up a little table and a chair. Emma grinned appreciatively as he said, "You can fold these napkins sitting down. No one will notice the difference, and your back will thank you." "I'm grateful, Antonio." He said, $200 for today's work, right?" Emma said, $250 if I stay through cleanup. That's nearly half the crib's price. Richard showed up in the kitchen doorway at around 10 o'clock. He didn't look like a man who would be married in a few hours, and he was dressed casually. His gaze swept the room before settling on Emma. He walked up to her corner and said, "Good morning. How are you feeling today?" Richard scowled. "I'm fine, Mr. Bennett," Emma said, still folding napkins. "You appear worn out." "Are you certain you should be at work?" "You're on your feet for a lot of hours," Emma explained plainly. "I need the money." "All right, take breaks when you can," Richard said, nodding with comprehension in his eyes. "And it's okay if you have to leave early," Emma called after him as he turned to leave. "Shouldn't you be preparing yourself?" Richard hesitated. "Yes, I guess I am," he said with a faint smile that stopped short of his eyes. "A big day." Emma watched him go. Perplexed by his lack of excitement on his wedding day, activity had accelerated significantly by midday. The bridal suite was quickly taken over by Vanessa and her 6 bridesmaids when they arrived. As she examined every aspect, her voice reverberated throughout the corridor. "These flowers are the wrong shade of white," she shouted at a trembling florist. "They appear to be cheap." Emma helped set up the reception area instead of going to the bridal room, saying, "Fix this now." At 1 o'clock, Emma noticed Michael Reed standing by himself on the balcony with a view of the ocean. The ballroom had been transformed with white flowers, crystal chandeliers, and tables arranged with exquisite china, with a band stage at one end where musicians were preparing their equipment. Trying to blend in, she passed by carrying a tray of glasses. He doesn't want to go through with it, you know, Michael stated abruptly, making Emma halt. Pardon me, she said. Richard, he's having doubts, Michael said, turning to her. Weeks have passed. Emma shook her head. Mr. Reed, I shouldn't be hearing this. Probably not, Michael said, but occasionally an outsider has a clearer perspective than those engaged. Julia Torres ran onto the balcony before Emma could reply. You're right there, she said, Michael. The photographer needs the best man for pictures. Julia's eyes briefly locked with Emma's as Michael walked away. Emma's uneasiness was heightened when she observed that moment of sympathy again. By 3 o'clock, visitors started pulling up in fancy cars. Champagne was offered by workers when men in fitted suits and women in designer gowns entered the venue. Emma moved farther into the background, attempting to blend in but helping out when needed. Emma contacted her mother while she was in Antonio's kitchen corner, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. How is the wedding going? Her mother inquired. It's pricey, Emma said. And how are you feeling, honey? Everything costs more than our house. Does the baby move a lot? Yes, particularly when I'm attempting to sleep. Her mother chuckled and said, I think she'll be a dancer, just like her mama used to be. Emma resumed her work after the call. I still have videos of you dancing around the living room. Emma watched from a side door as the ceremony got underway, and Richard stood at the altar, looking dapper in his tuxedo, but oddly aloof. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock, and the staff worked feverishly to make sure everything was flawless. The guests gasped in appreciation when Vanessa arrived in her expensive gown, which probably cost more than Emma would make in a year. The ceremony was short, and Richard and Vanessa were pronounced husband and wife within half an hour. As the reception started, Emma's job grew as she moved between tables, emptying plates and serving drinks as the throng cheered them back down the aisle together. Vanessa beaming and Richard smiling graciously, she pushed through the discomfort while her back and feet screamed in protest. A young woman, the band's replacement vocalist, sang a few songs with the group throughout dinner. Her voice was lovely but unimpressive. Emma saw Vanessa looking dissatisfiedly at the singer, and Margaret Bennett, who was sitting at the head table, looked at Emma and motioned for her to approach, saying politely, You should sit down for a while. You seem worn out. I'm all right, Mrs. Bennett, Emma demanded. Margaret suggested that you at least take brief rests. Perfect service is less essential than that baby. Emma passed Michael as she left, and he was seeing Vanessa whispering to her bridesmaids. The women's gaze followed Emma, and they giggled behind their hands. Dinner was over by 8 o'clock, and the band announced that the first dance was about to begin. As guests gathered to watch, Richard took Vanessa to the middle of the ballroom. But before the music began, Vanessa spoke hurriedly to Julia, who hurried to talk to the band. The musicians shook their heads in confusion, and Vanessa's face darkened for a second before she forced a grin and rushed to the kitchen, where Emma was stacking dirty plates. Emma, Vanessa said, raising her voice above normal, we have an emergency. Thank God you're here. Emma looked up, startled. What's wrong? Vanessa asked, putting her hand on Emma's arm. There has been a terrible miscommunication. The singer doesn't know our first dance song. Mother Bennett said, You have a lovely voice. I'm sorry to hear that, Emma said cautiously. I need your help, Vanessa added, her eyes wide and beseeching. It would mean so much to Richard if you could sing for our first dance. I don't know the music either. Emma froze, alarm bells flashing in her mind. The band knows it's a simple song, Vanessa insisted, and all you have to do is sing the lines. Here are the lyrics, she said, taking a sheet of paper from a secret pocket in her dress. Emma glanced at the paper, then at Antonio, who was standing close by, his eyes warning. I haven't performed in years, so I don't believe I can, Emma stated. Vanessa urged, Please. Emma paused. This would be a way of thanking Richard for his kindness. Richard had really been nice, giving her a job when she really needed one and changing her responsibilities as her pregnancy went on. "Just one song," Emma said. "Just one," Vanessa said, smiling. "You have 5 minutes to read the lyrics before Julia shows up at Emma's side. Julia will escort you to the stage." The wedding planner whispered, "Come with me." Emma studied the lyrics of the unknown song about commitment and eternal love as Julia walked her through the back corridors into the ballroom. It was easy enough, but something was still off. Emma inquired, "Will I have time to practice with the band?" Julia did not respond. Emma tried again. "Is a microphone set up for me?" Julia responded, avoiding eye contact. "It will be fine." They walked toward the ballroom, where Emma could see the musicians on stage shuffle through sheet music, seeming bewildered. One of the violinists shrugged and shook his head at the piano, and as they approached, Emma saw Vanessa across the room, grinning with sheer joy, and she and her bridesmaids exchanged a victorious glance. Emma's stomach fell in that instant as realization set in. This was a trap, not an opportunity. Emma wanted to stop going, but Julia held onto her arm tightly as she dragged her closer to the stage. "Wait," Emma said. "The band doesn't seem ready for me. Something's wrong." Julia eventually turned to face Emma, her eyes brimming with shame. "Sorry, I tried to talk her out of this." But she insisted. "Talk her out of what? What's going on?" Before Julia could respond, Vanessa grabbed the band leader's microphone. The music paused, and the 300 guests turned to face the stage. "We have a special treat for you tonight," Vanessa said, her voice echoing throughout the ballroom, adding, "And our maid thinks she can sing for us." Emma stood motionless next to the platform, still wearing her black uniform, her pregnant belly blatantly apparent. And as all eyes moved to her, some visitors looked bewildered, while others were amused. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Julia muttered, "Go on," while some of the bridesmaids giggled behind their hands. "I'm so sorry. I can't do this." "Emma set me up." She shook her head. Emma objected, "This is crazy." But 2 security guards stopped her as she turned to leave. "Mrs. Bennet asked you to stay for your performance," one guard remarked forcefully. Vanessa went on, her smile harsh. "Please welcome Emma Wilson, who will be singing for our first dance." "I never agreed to be humiliated." The audience's response was uneven, with some whispering to one another and others clapping respectfully. Emma could sense the disapproval on their faces. Isn't that special? Who did this pregnant maid think she was? Emma, humiliated and trapped, stepped slowly onto the platform, her legs wobbly, the baby kicking wildly in response to her stress, the stage lights too bright, and no vocalist's equipment put up. Vanessa handed Emma the microphone, leaning in to whisper, "Try not to embarrass yourself too much." There was no music stand for lyrics, and the microphone was not properly positioned. She then moved aside and joined Richard, who had just entered the ballroom. He appeared perplexed, frowning as he glanced between Emma and Vanessa. Emma was standing by herself on stage, dressed as a maid, in front of 300 affluent strangers. Her biggest fear was realizing being publicly rejected in front of the elite of Los Angeles. She could see smirks on some faces and hear whispers. "She's going to sing. The help. Is this a joke?" The poor thing seemed scared. Emma saw Antonio observing from the kitchen doorway. Margaret Bennet sitting upright in her chair, her face worried. Michael Reed standing close to the rear, his arms folded, taking in the scene. Emma glanced at the paper in her shaking palm as the bandleader cautiously walked up to her and asked, "What song are you singing, miss?" "We have no sheet music for you." Vanessa had given her a complicated song, with high notes she hadn't tried in years, obviously designed to make her fail, and Emma decided to do something about it. Instead of trying to sing Vanessa's impossible song, she would perform her own. Emma told the band leader, "I'll sing something else." The man nodded, then turned back to his musicians to repeat what he had written. "Just give me a simple 4-beat rhythm." Very slow. Emma closed her eyes and tried to still her pounding heart, thinking of her path from dreaming Nashville singer to humiliated pregnant maid and her unborn daughter who would one day hear this tale. Emma opened her eyes and took a deep breath as the drummer started a slow, steady rhythm. "This song is called Rise from the Ashes," she whispered softly into the microphone. "When the person you trust leaves you broken and wailing, when your dreams crumble to dust and the music stops playing," her voice was kind at first, almost breaking with sorrow. The audience fell silent as Emma's voice became more powerful with each line, bringing unexpected emotion and strength to the ballroom. "Sometimes you fall so you can rise higher from the ashes of it all. Find your buried fire." Even the waiters stood motionless, trays in hand, listening as the whispers ceased. Emma's voice was strong and clean, expressing both optimism and suffering in equal measure. Sensing that something remarkable was occurring, the band started to join in, with the violinist adding a soft tune that complemented Emma's voice and the pianist finding complementary chords. Richard stood at the back of the room, his face shifting from bewilderment to wonder. Vanessa's smile had vanished, and she stood stiffly next to Richard, her face darkening as she saw her scheme fail. And he saw Emma change before his eyes, from an unseen maid to a powerful figure whose voice filled the room. "I will rise from the ashes stronger than before. I will rise from the ashes, and I won't fall anymore." Emma's voice soared to notes that created goosebumps on the arms of many visitors when she performed the last chorus, which was meant to be a time of shame rather than triumph. After she was done, the ballroom fell silent for 3 long seconds. And then, as though a spell had been broken, several of the guests stood up and gave heartfelt applause. Emma stood motionless, taken aback by the response, as she had anticipated jeering rather than a standing ovation. One woman in the front wiped tears from her eyes. "Wasn't that cute?" Vanessa asked with a false sweetness, breaking the moment when she pushed through the musicians and took the microphone from Emma's hands. For a moment, she felt like her old self again. The singer with dreams of Nashville stages. "Now go back to the kitchen, where you belong." The atmosphere of the throng changed immediately, and guests looked at each other and said uncomfortable things. Despite the acclaim, Emma felt the sting of Vanessa's malice, which lingered in the air, impossible to ignore, and she walked back from the microphone with as much dignity as she could muster. She wanted to get off the platform as soon as possible to avoid the hundreds of people who were still watching her. But in her hurry, she failed to see a pool of water that had spilled during dinner service and had never been cleaned up. Emma's foot struck the slippery area, and she felt herself fall. The crowd gasped as she fell hard to the ground, wailing in agony as she landed on her side and instinctively threw her arms around her growing abdomen. Richard pushed past the guests right away and hurried to the stage. "Emma," he cried, his voice clear with anxiety. "Are you okay?" Vanessa stayed at the microphone, her voice shrill. "We should go on to our first dance, Richard. The staff can take care of things." Ignoring her, Richard climbed onto the stage and knelt next to Emma. With a gentle touch on her shoulder, he inquired, "Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" Emma strained to get up, writhing in agony. "And I believe she did. I'm phoning for medical assistance. Michael Reed already showed up next to them on his phone. I just need a minute. Just remain motionless, Emma." Antonio came running out of the kitchen with a fresh towel and a glass of water, and he knelt on Emma's other side, his face a worried expression. Antonio told her to take deep breaths and not to try to move just yet. Vanessa's voice rose above the microphone. "This is our wedding, Richard. The whole ballroom watched as Richard utterly disregarded the calls from his new bride. "Can someone get a chair?" Richard called to the staff, and two waiters hurriedly brought a chair to the edge of the platform. But his full attention was still on Emma, gently guiding her to a sitting posture. "I'm very sorry this occurred." Emma got up and walked to the chair with Richard's assistance, sitting down while still clutching her stomach. "I didn't know," Richard muttered softly to Emma. Vanessa rushed onto the stage, her white dress trailing after her. "You can't leave me standing here for the assistants, Richard. This is absurd. It's our first dance." As the guests watched the drama play out, the room grew silent once again. Richard slowly stood up and turned to meet his new wife, while Vanessa's comments lingered in the air, revealing more about her character than she realized. "That's enough, Vanessa," he said in a quiet but firm voice, his expression shifting from one of concern to something colder and harder. "Enough! This is our wedding!" Vanessa muttered. "She's ruining everything." Richard was about to reply when Antonio, holding his phone aloft, moved forward and exclaimed loudly, "I think everyone should know what really happened here tonight." Vanessa sought to take his phone from Antonio as he lifted it higher. "What do you think you're doing?" Vanessa shouted, her face flushed with rage. Antonio simply responded, revealing the truth to everyone. "I can't wait to see that pregnant nobody make a fool of herself," he said, pressing a button on his phone screen and turning up the volume. Vanessa's voice came clearly through the speaker. The crowd gasped and whispered, "I've told security not to let her leave the stage at all. It'll put her back in her place." As the tape went on, Vanessa laughed and added, "Our Richard won't know I set her up. He'll just think she embarrassed herself trying to get attention." The visitors nearby exchanged astonished looks. That Vanessa's face lost its color. "He edited that, but it's not true. It's taken out of context." Antonio remarked, "I knew you were planning something cruel, so I recorded it this morning when you were talking to your bridesmaids in the kitchen." Richard remained motionless, his face tightening as he listened. Richard whispered, "Is this true, Vanessa?" Margaret Bennett walked to the stage, her face displaying profound disappointment as she gazed at her new daughter-in-law. "Of course not." Emma sat, one hand protectively clutching her tummy, but Vanessa grabbed Richard's arm, saying, "Are you really going to believe the kitchen help over your wife?" She was more worried about her kid than the drama going on around her, even though the pain from her fall was still radiating through her side. Richard took Vanessa's hand off his arm, grabbed for his left hand, and slowly took off his wedding ring without saying a word. "This marriage is ended," Richard stated loud enough for the visitors close to hear, and the simple gesture instantly brought silence to the room. "What are you doing?" Vanessa muttered, her voice suddenly terrified. "Over a dumb maid?" Richard looked straight at Vanessa. "You can't be serious," Vanessa remarked. "Fortunately, the error lasted less than 2 hours. This is about who you are and have always been. It has nothing to do with Emma." "I apologize to everyone for this predicament," he said, turning to the startled wedding guests, "but I refuse to see it. Please know that this is for the best. The reception is over." Michael came up with a hotel security guard. He informed Richard that the paramedics would arrive in roughly 5 minutes. "Thank you, Michael," Richard answered. He walked back to Emma, who was kneeling next to her chair, and asked, "How are you feeling?" Emma said softly, "I'm worried about the baby. The pain is getting worse." Mr. Clark replied, "You can't just end a marriage like this." Vanessa's parents hurried to her daughter's side, with her father confronting Richard and her mother wrapping an arm around Vanessa's shoulders. "Right now, I'm worried about Emma's health. There are legal procedures and talks to be had." "We can talk about the legalities tomorrow," Richard said firmly. Margaret stepped closer to Vanessa as she said, "This is so humiliating. How could you do this to me on our wedding day? How could you do this to another human being?" Vanessa suddenly broke down in tears, her ideal bride persona utterly disintegrating. The throng started to thin out, guests chatting to one another as they collected their stuff, some seeming ashamed, some secretly enjoying the spectacle. "That young woman is pregnant, and you purposefully set her up for public humiliation." The paramedics arrived, pushing through the remaining guests with a stretcher, and immediately checked Emma, checking her vital signs and inquiring about her pregnancy while expensive gifts were abandoned on a table near the entrance. One paramedic inquired, "How far along are you?" Emma said, 6 months. "Any bleeding or fluid leakage?" "No. Just pain on my right side where I fell. It's probably just bruising, but we don't take chances when you're pregnant, so we'll transport you to Cedars-Sinai to be checked out." The paramedics put Emma onto the stretcher. Richard was standing close by. "Are you family?" the paramedics inquired. "I'd like to go with her," Vanessa yelled across the room. "He's my husband. He's not going anywhere with her." Before Richard could respond, "No, I'm not your husband." Richard turned to Vanessa one last time. "The paperwork hasn't been filed yet, and it never will be." He turned back to the paramedics and said, "That's fine, sir. I'm her employer, and I feel responsible for what happened tonight. I'll clear out your room at the house and pack your belongings," Antonio said as they pushed Emma toward the doorway. "You can follow us in your car." With tears suddenly welling up in her eyes, Emma said, "Thank you." "Don't go back there with her still around," Antonio firmly answered. "Don't apologize. You did nothing wrong. I apologized for everything. By the way, you have a great voice." Margaret also joined Emma, and she said, "I'll make sure your belongings are safe, and I'll check on you tomorrow." The perfect wedding had devolved into chaos, and Richard talked briefly with Michael before heading to his car to follow the ambulance as the paramedics lifted the stretcher into the ambulance, and Emma saw Vanessa through the ballroom doors, still in her wedding dress, surrounded by her parents and bridesmaids. Vanessa yelled out to him as he passed her, "You're choosing the help over your wife." Her voice was shrill with incredulity, and Richard hesitated. "The marriage ended before it started, and you were never my wife." He went on to say, "Just like your social standing in this town after tonight." Emma, who had lost both her job and her house in one night, lay in the ambulance answering the paramedics' questions while contemplating what would happen next on the quiet and anxious ride to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Where would they go, even if the baby was fine? At the hospital, doctors took Emma for an ultrasound right away, and Richard waited in the hallway, still in his wedding tuxedo. While nurses stared at him curiously as they went by, he ignored them, concentrating on his phone and sending messages to Michael. 30 minutes later, a doctor came out of the examination room. She said, "Mr. Bennett." "Yes." Richard got up fast. "How is she? Is the baby okay?" The doctor told him that both mother and baby were well. "We want to keep an eye on her for a few hours just to be safe. She had Braxton Hicks contractions, which were brought on by stress and the accident. She has some bruises on her hip, but no evidence of preterm labor or placental abruption. Can I see her?" "Yes, she's asking for you." Richard felt a wave of relief. When he walked into the room, he saw Emma lying in a hospital bed with a monitor taped to her belly, monitoring the baby's heartbeat. As soon as Emma saw Richard's worried look, she answered, "The baby's okay. The doctor told me," he remarked, sitting in a chair next to her bed. The steady rhythm infused the room with strength and reassurance. Emma was unable to look him in the eyes. "I'm sorry about your wedding. How are you feeling?" "Sore, ashamed, anxious about what comes next." "Don't apologize. I should be thanking you," Richard said, shaking his head. Richard ran a hand through his hair. "I've been ignoring warning signs for months." "Thanking me? For what? For revealing Vanessa's true nature to me before it was too late. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound in the room being the baby's heartbeat, but I ignored Michael's warnings. Richard finally asked, "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Emma seemed taken aback by the abrupt change of topic. "Your voice is extraordinary. I've been singing since I was little." She put her palm on her abdomen. Emma nodded before the baby's father left. I had studied music in college and had performed in Nashville for 5 years prior. When I told Jake I was pregnant, he left the following day since he didn't want a child and was more concerned with his music career. "I'm sorry," Richard scowled, "but it's all right. I've come to terms with it." A nurse interrupted the scene to check Emma's vitals, looking at Richard's tuxedo as she worked. "Special occasion?" she inquired. Richard and Emma looked at each other and smiled in spite of everything. "You could say that," Richard said. Richard's phone buzzed with messages after the nurse left, and he instantly examined them. "Michael has handled things at the venue," he informed Emma. Emma said, "Where will I go? Antonio is packing your things. My mother is staying at the house tonight to make sure Vanessa takes her belongings out," Richard reassured her. "You don't need to worry about that tonight, as the reality of her circumstances set in." Emma nodded, suddenly worn out by the day's events. "For now, just rest and take care of yourself and the baby. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." As the painkillers the doctors had prescribed started to work, her eyes became heavy, and she heard Richard whisper, "That song you wrote, Rise from the Ashes." Emma woke up to sunlight pouring through hospital blinds. "It's amazing. The world ought to hear it." She briefly lost her memory of her location before the events of the night before, the wedding, the song, the fall, and Richard's decision to dissolve his marriage just minutes after it had started came rushing back. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" "Better," Emma responded as a nurse came in, checking the monitor that was still recording the baby's heartbeat. The nurse rearranged Emma's pillows. "The doctor will be in shortly to talk about discharge. Is my baby still okay? Strong heartbeat, usual movement?" Before Emma could respond, the door opened and Margaret Bennett entered with a small bag, followed by Antonio with a box containing Emma's possessions. "You have guests waiting. Should I send them in?" Margaret took Emma's hand and said, "Oh, my dear, how are you?" "I'm okay." The doctor stated the baby was unharmed. Antonio put the box down. "Vanessa was still in your room when I left, but she was packing as well." "I packed everything out of your room," Emma inquired. "What happened after I left?" Margaret sat in the chair next to the bed, and first there was chaos. She hesitated while Michael took over and informed the attendees that the reception had been cancelled because of a medical emergency, and the majority of them left right away. "The marriage is ended." Antonio nodded. Vanessa's parents tried to persuade Richard to change his mind, but he refused. 3 visitors called to request copies of the audio, which had already gone viral. "I never meant to cause such trouble," Emma remarked quietly. Margaret told her, "You didn't cause anything. Vanessa made this happen herself." The door opened again, and Richard came in with coffee cups. "I thought you might need this," he remarked, passing coffee to Margaret and Antonio, and a cup of tea to Emma after changing out of his tuxedo and into jeans and a button-down shirt. "Thank you," Emma replied as their fingers touched, and she hastily averted her gaze when the nurse stated this was okay. Richard continued, "I talked to your doctor, and if everything stays stable, they'll discharge you this afternoon," Emma answered. "That's good," but her expression was clouded by anxiety. Richard started, "You don't have to worry about either right now, but I need to find a place to stay and find another job. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." Richard perched on the side of the bed and said, "What do you mean?" "I have a guest house on my property." which has its own entrance and is separate from the main house. You're free to remain there until you decide what to do next." "That's too much," Emma said. "Think of it as part of your severance package," Richard said, adding, "I have a business idea for you." A doctor came in with a clipboard before Emma could reply. "Let's see how you and the baby are doing. Mrs. Wilson." Margaret, Antonio, and Richard left as the doctor checked Emma. In the corridor, Richard got a call from Michael. Richard asked, "How bad is it?" Naturally, only Richard's part of the exchange was audible to Margaret and Antonio. "No, I'm not sorry. Sure, call my lawyer. I appreciate you taking care of everything." "Michael." Richard explained that Vanessa's family is threatening legal action, and there are already reports going around online about what happened. "Are you worried?" Antonio questioned as Margaret patted her son's arm after he hung up. "Number. Your recording has the truth on our side." The doctor completed her examination inside the room. "Everything appears to be in order, Ms. Wilson. You are healthy, as is your kid. Just avoid intense activities and heavy lifting for a few days." Emma inquired, "When can I return to work?" The doctor recommended light work for at least a week and avoiding prolonged standing. The others came back after the doctor had gone, and Emma turned to Richard and asked, "What was this business proposition you mentioned?" "Your song last night was extraordinary, not just the performance, but the composition itself," Richard said, drawing his chair closer to the bed. Emma looked at him incredulously. "I'd like to introduce you to some producers who could help record your song professionally. I have contacts in the music industry through the entertainment clients of my company." Richard explained, "I think your song has commercial potential. This would be a business arrangement. You want to help me with my music. It's not charity. We both gain if the song is successful." Emma said, "I don't know what to say." Margaret urged her to say yes. Antonio nodded. "Emma, your words touched everyone in that room last night. Richard never extends business offers unless he sees real potential." Emma twisted the little silver ring on her finger, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "But I'm going to have a kid in 3 months." Even those who had come expecting to laugh were crying instead. "That's why the guest house is ideal. I can't exactly start a music career right now. You can rest during your last trimester. Record demos when you feel like it, and we'll come up with a plan after the baby comes," Richard added. A nurse came in with discharge papers as they were working out the specifics, and Emma signed them while Richard's phone rang non-stop with messages. "Is that about the wedding?" Emma questioned. "Fortunately, the recording is also making the rounds, which undermines Vanessa's bridesmaids' allegation that we had a hidden connection." Richard looked at his phone. Richard responded, "Don't worry about my reputation. My company is solid, and my real friends know the truth." Emma remarked, I'm so sorry this is affecting your reputation." When the paperwork was finished, a hospital assistant with a wheelchair came to take Emma to the exit, where all patients were expected to go, even though Emma insisted she could walk. When they got to Richard's car, Emma saw a photographer across the street. "Ignore the people taking pictures of us." Richard assisted her in getting into the passenger seat. Emma's life had altered drastically in just one day, and she stared out the window, lost in contemplation on the journey to Richard's house in Westwood. The story will end soon enough. Richard inquired, "Are you okay?" Emma replied, "I was your maid yesterday. I'm just overwhelmed." When they got at Richard's mansion, he drove past the main door to a tree-lined drive that led to a modest but exquisite guest house. "Today you're offering to help with my music career. Life may change suddenly." "This is the guest house?" Emma asked, surprised. "Built in the same Spanish style as the main house, with large windows and a private patio." It hasn't been used since my sister moved out last year, Richard said. Antonio had already brought your stuff and filled the kitchen with food, and Emma discovered a large living room with cozy furnishings, a completely furnished kitchen, and a bedroom with a bathroom attached. Her few possessions were neatly placed on the dresser. She turned to Richard and whispered, "This is too much." "I can't." "You can," he said gently. "Think of it as a stopgap measure until we work out your music's next moves." Emma approached the window and gazed out at the garden. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Richard was silent for a time. He stopped. "In part because I think you're talented, in part because I feel accountable for what happened, and in part because sometimes people deserve a second chance at their goals." They were interrupted by a knock at the door, and Margaret came in with food bags. Emma grinned, moved by the consideration, and she said, "I brought some pregnancy essentials, body pillow for sleeping, ginger tea for nausea, and those stretch mark creams everyone recommends. I believe we are past the formalities. Mrs. Bennet." "Thank you. Call me Margaret." Richard's phone rang again as Margaret was unpacking the bags, and he scowled as he looked at the screen and stated, "I have to take this. It's my lawyer." Margaret remained on the couch next to Emma while Richard went outside. "He's a good man," Margaret whispered softly. "He's been really nice, I know." Emma blushed. "Better than his taste in fiancés would suggest." "It's more than kindness," Margaret said. "He sees your potential. Richard has always seen promise in people and in business." The audio spoke for itself, and they could hear Richard's voice outside becoming more firm. "No, I will not meet with her." His expression was tight when he returned, and Vanessa's family is lobbying for a settlement to keep things secret. "I understand the legal ramifications." Emma said, "Will you agree?" Richard sat across from them. "Number?" she said. "I have nothing to hide. Most of the visitors have already heard Antonio's recording, and Vanessa's version of events isn't getting much momentum." Margaret got up to go. She kissed Emma's face and said, "I should go. Emma needs rest, and you have calls to make. I'll be over tomorrow. Give me a call if you need anything." Richard and Emma sat in awkward silence for a bit after Margaret left. Richard finally responded. "You must be tired. What happens now?" Emma questioned. "I should go too. I'll phone several people tomorrow because of your ties in the music industry. A producer named Sam Jackson might be especially interested in your sound." Richard stood. "Get some rest today so that we may begin making plans for your future tomorrow." "Thank you for everything," Emma called after Richard as he made his way to the door. Richard turned. After he departed, Emma sat by herself in the quiet guest house with one palm on her stomach. "Thank you for that song. You have no idea how much that altered. Our lives have changed in ways I never could have predicted," she said. "Well, baby." As Emma's pregnancy progressed, the tiny guest house became her haven, and Richard turned a portion of it into a basic recording room with soundproofing panels and basic equipment. Over the course of the next 2 months, Emma's life changed in ways she never could have predicted. One morning, while adjusting a microphone stand, Richard mentioned, "Sam Jackson is coming tomorrow. He's very interested in your song." "I'm nervous. I haven't performed professionally in years," Emma said, resting her palm on her now large belly. "He's already aware of your talent after listening to the wedding recording." Emma was surprised by how well the initial meeting with Sam went. As Richard recorded, Sam, a tall man with grey dreadlocks and decades of expertise in the music business, listened carefully to Emma sing "Rise from the Ashes," and when she finished, he grinned widely. "That's something extraordinary. Right there, we can work with raw, honest, and powerful." Emma recorded recordings over the next few weeks as Sam set up studio musicians and made production schedules. While Vanessa's attempts to harm Richard's reputation failed, the recording of her plan to humiliate Emma had circulated through Los Angeles social circles, and a number of wedding guests publicly endorsed Richard's version of events. Emma, who was 8 months pregnant, found new energy in making music again. During a visit to the guest house, Michael informed Richard that her parents had finally persuaded her to return to New York after her family's foundation lost 3 significant benefactors. Richard said, "Good, perhaps she can start over there." Emma stayed out of the spotlight, concentrating on her music and getting ready for her kid. Emma stated, "My water broke early one Tuesday morning, calling Richard's phone at 3 o'clock. I think the baby's coming. Margaret came over practically every day with baby items and pregnancy advice. I'll drive you to the hospital. Your luggage is packed." "By the door," Emma murmured, breathing through a contraction. Richard reached the guest house in a matter of minutes. Emma's labor proceeded swiftly at Cedars Sinai Medical Center, and Richard phoned Michael, Margaret, and Antonio, who all came to wait in the hospital lobby. As the contractions grew more intense, Emma informed Richard, "You don't have to stay." After 6 hours of labor, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces. "This could take hours," he said. "But I'm not going anywhere." His assurance surprised them both. The nurse placed the little baby on Emma's chest and remarked, "She's beautiful." "Do you have a name picked out?" Emma said, glancing at the red-faced, wriggling baby with wispy dark hair. "Lily. Her name is Lily Wilson." Then, after Emma had slept, Richard came in with Margaret, Antonio, and Michael in the hospital room. "She's perfect," Margaret whispered, stroking Lily's small hand. And Antonio brushed away a tear like a tiny angel. "From all of us. Baby necessities." Michael set a big present bag next to the bed. Richard stood a little apart from the others, watching Emma hug her daughter in awe. A sensation changed in his chest that he wasn't yet ready to label. Emma remarked, "Thank you for being here. I never expected to have anyone with me for this." Richard stayed next to Emma's bed as the others went to get coffee. Richard said, "I wouldn't have missed it." A message buzzed on his phone. "It's from Sam. While you've been here, he's been working on your recording." Emma held Lily in her arms. "What does he say?" "Your song is a hit with the label." Richard gave her the message, "and they believe it has hit potential and want to release it as a single." Emma glanced down at Lily and then back at Richard. "Time is flying by. I was your maid 2 months ago. And now I have a kid and might pursue a career in music." Richard echoed his remarks from the day after the wedding when he said, "Life changes quickly sometimes." Sam provided daily updates on the recording's progress while Emma was recovering in the hospital, and studio musicians had subtly accompanied Emma's vocals to add emotional depth without overpowering her voice. Richard held his phone close to Emma's bed on her 3rd day in the hospital and said, "Listen to this latest mix." Emma closed her eyes as the music began, and her voice filled the tiny room with the accompaniment of a piano and gentle strings. "It's beautiful," she remarked, opening her eyes to see Richard observing her. "I never imagined it could sound like that. Sam can set up equipment at the guest house so you don't have to take the baby with you, and he wants you to record the last vocals next week." Emma and the baby returned to the guest house a week following Lily's birth. Sam came with recording equipment and set it up in the living room, and Richard informed Emma, "We'll keep it simple." Richard had arranged for a part-time nurse to assist Emma during her recuperation so she could relax and focus on her music. Between feedings and changing diapers, Emma recorded the last vocals for Rise from the Ashes. Her voice, somewhat altered by childbirth and new motherhood, held even more emotional depth than before. It was just you and the microphone, with the baby monitor next to you so you could hear Lily. The label wants to release this in 2 weeks. So that's it, Sam remarked when Emma finished the last take. We have everything we need. They are thrilled about your story, Emma said, astonished. So soon. The gifted vocalist who was embarrassed at a millionaire's wedding but overcame it with her song, while giving birth, no less. Emma scowled. I don't want to be marketed as some sort of victim. It's marketing gold, Richard reassured her. I've looked over their campaign plans, and they're not taking advantage of the scandal. They're focusing on your talent and resilience. Emma became increasingly anxious as the release date drew near, and one night when Richard was helping her put together a crib in the guest house, she expressed her worries. What if people aren't genuinely fond of the song? And they're just interested in the wedding drama? Richard paused, screwdriver in hand. Emma picked Lily up from her bassinet as the baby started to fuss. However, even if some people listen to the song first because of the story, they will remain for your voice. Someday, I want her to be proud of me, not just as her mother, but as someone who pursued her dreams. Richard observed Emma tenderly rocking Lily. Emma was fragile, a new mother just beginning to rebuild her life. And the last thing she needed was her former employer falling in love with her. His feelings for her had been stronger every day, but he kept them carefully guarded. Richard remarked, "She will be proud. You're building something meaningful." Emma sat in the guest house feeding Lily on the day Riser from the Ashes was released, while Richard watched online responses. Within days, radio stations nationwide started playing the song, and he said it had already been aired over 1,000 times with overwhelmingly positive reactions. Sam said over the phone 10 days after the release, "Your song just hit number 25 on the Billboard chart, which is extraordinary for a debut single." Emma's tale was reported on music blogs, which commended her emotive lyrics and genuine voice. The song became better every day, and Emma was thrilled to see that her music was reaching more people than she ever thought possible. 3 weeks after the release, Michael yelled, "Number 3" at a dinner at the guest house. Richard, Margaret, Antonio, Michael, and even Sam had joined them to celebrate, and Emma glanced around the table at the people who had become her support system. "You've officially made it, Emma." Emma remarked, "I couldn't have done this without all of you." Later that night, after everyone had gone, Emma discovered Richard on the terrace, gazing up at the stars as baby Lily slept soundly in a cradle nearby. Richard looked to her, shocked. "Thank you for everything," she murmured, following him. "I think it's time I start looking for my own place. I understand, and I'm appreciative. You're free to remain as long as you need to, but now that the song is doing well and the label is offering in advance for a full album, I can afford my own home." Richard nodded, concealing his sadness. "Lily and I need our own space to build our life. I understand, of course. I found a small house in Studio City, nothing fancy, but it has a room I could turn into a home studio and a yard," Emma added. "It feels nice to plan our future. 6 months ago, I was alone and desperate. That sounds ideal for you and Lily," Emma said with a smile. Richard stated, "I just realized what was already there. Your talent and your strength were always a part of you. Now I have options. And it's because you believed in me." Richard's phone rang when they were standing together under the stars, and he scowled as he looked at the screen and said, "It's my lawyer." Richard moved aside to take the call, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. Although her life had changed drastically, the most significant changes were yet to come. After Richard returned from his phone call with a solemn expression, Emma inquired, "But is everything okay?" Emma felt ready to embrace the future, whatever it might contain, with her song on the charts and a new home on the horizon. Vanessa's publicist is attempting to get tales about us in the tabloids, saying that our relationship began months before the wedding, and that was my lawyer. Emma shook her head. We didn't talk much before that evening, so that's absurd. They're trying to preserve her reputation, therefore they don't care about the facts. Richard placed his phone away. Don't worry, though. My legal team will take care of it. 3 weeks later, Emma watched as movers brought in the remainder of her furniture in the living room of her new Studio City home. "This place is perfect," Margaret said, putting baby clothes in a drawer. "Close enough to visit, but your own space." The hardwood floors and fresh paint were highlighted by the sunlight streaming through the large windows, and Lily, who was 3 months old, was lying on a playmat, kicking her legs and making soft, gurgling sounds. The doorbell rang, and Emma grinned. "I never imagined I'd own a home, especially in Los Angeles." When Emma opened it, Richard was holding a potted plant and a little wrapped gift, which he described as housewarming presents before entering. "The plant is meant to be easy to maintain." Emma took the gifts and exclaimed, "It's beautiful. Thank you. Good for busy new moms." "Hello there. Little one, do you like your new home?" Richard crouched next to Lily, who instantly clutched his finger. Emma unwrapped the modest gift, a framed copy of the Billboard chart that showed Rise from the Ashes at number 3, while Lily amused Richard. Richard stood up and explained, "I thought you might want to remember this moment. Your first hit." "I can hardly believe it's real," Emma replied, setting the frame on her mantel. Margaret chuckled. "There's no chance that I'll wake up and find myself back in the mansion folding laundry. Now you're a rising star." Antonio, holding a big pot, answered the doorbell once more. He offered homemade soup for the new homeowner. As they gathered in Emma's kitchen, Antonio mentioned, "I heard she's back in New York." In an attempt to damage my reputation, her family pulled some strings to gain her a position at their foundation, but their plan backfired. And Richard shook his head. The recording made it clear what really happened. No one believes her version anymore. "The majority of our wedding guests have contacted me to express support," Margaret said. "Sam called this morning and said, 'The label wants me to start working on a full album.'" Emma shifted the topic, since she felt awkward talking about Vanessa. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared. Excited. I never expected this second chance." "That's great news," Richard replied. Emma glanced at Lily. Margaret said, "I'd be happy to help. I'll need to find childcare while I record." After Margaret and Antonio left later that afternoon, Richard assisted Emma in setting up a modest recording space in the spare bedroom. "Sam is bringing better equipment tomorrow," Richard said, setting up a microphone stand. "I'm already in love with this little girl. I still can't believe this is happening. This is just temporary." "It's more than enough," Emma responded. Richard stopped and watched Emma sorting through music sheets. In the 3 weeks since the wedding fiasco, their relationship had changed from one of employer and employee to one of friendship, based on respect and common experiences. "How are you really doing?" Richard asked, given how quickly things had changed. Emma sat on the bed's edge. "It can be overwhelming at times. I was worried about rent 3 months ago, but now I have a house and a record deal." Richard added, "Your talent is extraordinary and you deserve it all." Emma flushed at the praise. "How are things going for you?" "Better than anticipated. The business hasn't been negatively impacted. The majority of people have already moved on from the failed wedding." Emma inquired carefully, and Richard thought about it. "I've come to realize how close I was to making a catastrophic mistake. I simply refused to accept that Vanessa and I were wrong for each other from the start." Lily's sobs from the other room cut off their discourse. Richard stood while Emma rushed to see how her daughter was doing and returned holding the infant. "Someone's hungry," she said. Emma sat down in a rocking rocker with Lily and said, "You have your hands full, and I have a meeting with Michael about a new project." "A new security software," she said. "Actually, no. Michael can take care of things while I concentrate on something new, and I'm thinking about taking a break from the day-to-day operations of the business." Emma looked up in amazement, thinking, that's a big change, a foundation to support single parents with artistic ambitions. Richard said, "Your journey inspired me. There are many talented people who just need support and opportunity." Emma fed Lily after Richard departed, reflecting on what he had said. "The label loves your story," Emma said as they set up. And the following morning, Sam Jackson arrived with professional recording equipment and great news. She felt warm with the thought that her experience could inspire something that would assist others. Emma scowled. "They want to use Lily in some of the promotional materials. If you're okay with that, you overcome humiliation to achieve musical success, young single mother." "I don't want to use my baby for publicity." "You can do that," Sam told her, "but think about this. You could encourage other women in similar circumstances by presenting yourself as a mother who is pursuing her aspirations." Sam introduced Emma to session musicians who would play on her album while they were working on arrangements for her songs. "Your song connected with all of us," Lisa said. By evening, they had planned out 5 songs for the album, with the lead single, "Rise from the Ashes," feeling true in a way that most songs don't. The violinist had played on many hit singles. Recording started in earnest the following week, with Emma juggling studio sessions with taking care of Lily, frequently cradling the baby in between takes, and feeling a creative energy she hadn't felt since before her pregnancy. "You sound different now," Sam noted during one session. "There's more depth to your voice since having Lily." Margaret often assisted, taking care of Lily in a separate room while Emma recorded vocals. "Everything changes when you become a mother," Emma said. While on lunch, Emma got a call from a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, Emma. It's Jake." Emma froze as she heard the voice of Jake Miller, her ex-boyfriend, who had vanished when she told him about the pregnancy. How did you get my number?" she demanded icily. Jake paused. "Your song is everywhere. I saw you on the news." Emma remarked, "I heard you had the baby. She's 3 months old, and her name is Lily." Emma clutched the phone. "You left me the day I informed you I was pregnant. I've been thinking perhaps we should discuss, me meeting her sometime. You haven't phoned once in a year. I apologize. I wasn't prepared at the time, but I've changed since then. No. Jake, Lily deserves better than for you to vanish and then emerge whenever it suits you." Lily's father called, and Emma sat trembling until Sam came to her. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Sam shook his head, saying, "It's amazing how success makes people remember old connections." He saw the news about the song and immediately wanted to get involved. Richard, who had been to see the recording set up that evening, remarked gently, "He has some legal rights as her father. But given the circumstances, you should consult a lawyer before agreeing to anything." Emma had told Richard about Jake's call. Emma feared, "I can't afford a custody battle." Richard reassured her, "I know excellent family lawyers who can advise you." Don't meet with him without legal advice. Emma became aware of how much she had become dependent on Richard as they conversed, not only for business advice, but also for emotional support. He had grown to be a significant part of her and Lily's lives. "Why are you doing all this for us?" Emma said abruptly, and Richard appeared taken aback. He answered simply, "Because I care about you both, and because everyone deserves someone in their corner." Emma put her newfound feelings into her performance during a recording session the next day. When she ended, Sam remarked, "That was incredible. Whatever you're feeling right now, keep channeling it." The musicians watched in awe as she sang with genuine strength and emotion. On her way home that night, Emma noticed a billboard on Sunset Boulevard that showed her face, the song's title, and the release date of her next album. For the first time, Emma genuinely thought her life had changed forever. She was Emma Wilson, recording artist, not Emma the Maid, and she was prepared to face whatever was ahead. Emma kept thinking about the advertisement she had seen on Sunset Boulevard. As the reality of her new existence finally set in, Emma woke up to Lily's sobs at 5 o'clock the following morning. Her face, her own face, was bigger than life, promoting her song to the entire city of Los Angeles. Sam texted her as she was feeding her daughter in the rocking chair. "Turn on KBLA radio at 7:30. They're playing your song during morning drive time. This next track is climbing charts nationwide," the radio announcer announced as Emma sat in her kitchen with Lily in her lap 2 hours later. From a former maid who stole the show at a millionaire's wedding, here's Emma Wilson with Rise from the Ashes. Emma's eyes welled up with tears when she heard her voice on the radio, and she said to Lily, "That's Mommy's singing," as she held her close when the doorbell rang. Richard was standing outside with coffee cups and a pink plush bear when Emma opened the door. "Did you hear it?" he asked enthusiastically, and Emma said, "I did." Opening the door for him, Richard pulled out his phone and said, "Your song just broke the top 20 on the national charts. Well, this might help it feel more real. Sam contacted me just now," and Emma sat down in shock. "Already in the top 20? People relate to your voice and your narrative." Richard gave her the coffee. "The bear is for Lily," Emma explained, adding that she was finally dozing off. Richard examined her face and said, "You look tired. These early mornings are exhausting. Are you receiving adequate assistance? I'm getting by, and Margaret stops by most afternoons. Antonio also comes by." Emma grinned, appreciative of his understanding. "You're not just managing. You're recording an album while taking care of a newborn. How is the Vanessa problem going?" Richard's face darkened a little. After hearing the audio recording, her parents persuaded her to move back to New York permanently, and her publicist attempted to sell stories to a number of tabloids, but most editors rejected the idea. Emma remarked, "That's good news for everyone." Richard responded, "Enough about Vanessa. Sam informed me that the label plans to hold a small showcase the following month. I don't know if I'm ready to perform live," Emma said, referring to the press and industry professionals. "What about Lily? I'm sure Margaret would watch her, and it would just be 2 or 3 songs." Emma's phone rang before she could answer, and it was Sam once more. "They're running a segment on you right now, Emma, so turn on entertainment tonight." Emma struggled for the remote control and switched on her tiny TV. Emma Wilson, a former maid who was publicly humiliated at tech millionaire Richard Bennett's wedding, turned that moment into musical gold. The host was talking over images of Emma singing at the wedding, which were obviously phone footage from a guest. The host claimed that the song that came out of a wedding disaster has become this summer's surprise hit. Emma murmured, "Oh my God." The program featured recordings of social media comments to her song, including notes from several well-known singers praising her voice. Her track, Rise from the Ashes, has peaked at number 15 on the Billboard charts and is still climbing. This is moving so quickly. Richard closely observed her response. "Is it too much?" Emma said. "I don't know. I'm excited, but I'm also scared. What if this is only temporary? What if people forget about me in a month?" Richard told her that wouldn't happen. "Your skill is genuine. This isn't only about the wedding story. Emma's life was a blur of phone interviews, recording sessions, and taking care of Lily over the course of the next 2 weeks, while her song continued to rise in the charts, peaking at number 10 and then number 5. Emma was recording vocals in her home studio one evening when Margaret showed up with some wonderful news. "Your song reached number 3 on the Billboard chart," she exclaimed, carrying Lily, "and Richard just called." Shocked, Emma took off her headphones. "Number 3? No, that's not possible. It's true." Richard, Margaret, Antonio, and Michael were all in Emma's living room within an hour, and Sam joined them on speakerphone. "He's on his way over with champagne to celebrate. The label is excited. They want to move up the album release date and schedule a small tour for next year. Number 3 is extraordinary for a debut artist," Sam added. "I can't travel with a baby," Emma said, looking at Lily, who was sleeping in her bassinet. "We'll figure it out," Sam said. "Nothing too taxing, maybe just weekend gigs in big cities." Richard lifted his glass after they hung up with Sam. To Emma, whose brilliance and bravery made this possible. As everyone toasted, Emma was overcome with appreciation for everyone who had come to be her pillar of support, especially Richard, who had always had faith in her. The foundation is formally created. Later, after the others had gone, Richard assisted Emma with cleaning up. "I've been meaning to tell you," he said, washing glasses in the sink. Emma responded, "That's a great name. The Richard Bennett Foundation for Artistic Parents. Actually, if it's okay with you, I was hoping to call it the Lily Foundation. In a sense, she was the inspiration." Emma started crying. "I would be honored. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations at my company, and so would Lily when she's old enough to understand. Michael will take over as CEO while I focus on the foundation," Richard added. "If you are willing, I would like you to serve on the advisory board." "What would I do? Tell about your experience. Assist in finding talented artists who are also parents. Your viewpoint would be priceless." Emma felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with music or career success as they discussed the prospects of the foundation, and she observed Richard looking at her differently, with a gentleness in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Emma's phone rang, interrupting the moment, and she answered even though she didn't recognize the number. "Is this Emma Wilson?" a male voice inquired. "I know my son has a child with you, but who's calling? It's Jake's father, Dennis Miller." Emma froze. Emma's voice hardened as she added, "Yes, a daughter named Lily. Jake told me he reached out to you and you refused to let him see his child. He abandoned me when I told him I was pregnant. Since he hasn't contacted in 9 months, he's eager to get involved. I believe it's only fair that our family gets access to her, as he is both Lily's grandfather and his father." Emma looked at Richard in a panic and said, "I need to talk to my lawyer about this." "Lawyer? We're talking about family here," Dennis replied, adding that Jake had rights as her father. Richard, who understood the situation instantly, questioned, "Jake's father?" Emma answered firmly, "I'll have my lawyer contact Jake," and then hung off. "Would they want access to Lily?" Emma added, settling into a chair. "Jake wants to become a parent now that the song is popular." Richard, who was seated next to her, reassured her, saying, "I'll call my family attorney tonight. We'll keep Lily safe." Emma's hand trembled. "What if they tried to take her away from me?" Richard assured her that wouldn't happen. "Jake left the two of you." Emma nodded, trying to collect herself. "Court's like the parent who has been there and is taking care of the child, which is you." Richard grasped her hand and said, "Thank you for being here. I don't know what I'd do without your help. You're stronger than you think, but you don't have to face this alone." Richard's lawyer, Barbara Chen, saw Emma at her home the following morning. Barbara stated, "From what you've told me, Jake has a very weak case for custody, but if he establishes paternity, he might be entitled to visitation rights." "What should I do?" Emma inquired. "Don't meet with him alone. Let me handle all correspondence with him and keep a record of everything. And don't worry too much. Lily is obviously doing well in your care, and courts put the child's welfare first. Later that day, Emma got a call from Sam with some shocking news. He continued eagerly. The voice producers want you to perform on next week's show. It would be huge exposure. Next week? Emma asked. I don't know if I'm ready for television. Just one song, Rise from the Ashes, Sam pleaded, because you are so ready. The song is at number 3, so it's great timing. Emma's life had altered so drastically in such a short period of time that she stayed in her garden after the call, watching hummingbirds visit the flowers Richard had planted as a welcoming present. She had been cleaning Richard's mansion, pregnant, and alone 6 months prior, but now she had a gorgeous kid, a popular song, a record deal, a growing group of friends who were all rooting for her, and she was even starting to feel something for Richard. She was experiencing feelings of excitement and fear. Emma had just learned about The Voice when her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Emma grinned as she composed her response. Congratulations! Dinner tomorrow to celebrate. I'll bring food to your place, so you don't have to worry about a sitter for Lily. That sounds great. Thank you for everything. As she sent the message, Emma became aware that she had never felt more optimistic about the future. Even with Jake's problems and the demands of her new job, 6 months went by in a blur of music and motherhood, and Emma was finally rising from the ashes of her past for the first time in her life. Her career had taken off after her participation on The Voice, with her album hitting the top 10 and numerous requests to perform live. Emma sat at her kitchen table on a bright spring morning, gazing at an official-looking envelope that contained an invitation that yet felt unattainable. Lily had grown from a tiny baby to an inquisitive 9-month-old who shouted with excitement whenever music played. Emma nodded, and Richard, who had started dropping in a few times a week, usually bringing food or toys for Lily, questioned, "Is that what I think it is?" as he entered carrying a bag of groceries. "Emma, that's amazing. The Hollywood Bowl wants me to do a full concert, not just a single song, next month. The Hollywood Bowl is legendary. I know, I'm scared." Richard sat down the groceries and read the letter. "I've never performed for that many people before. How many seats does it have?" "Over 17,000, Emma murmured as she watched Lily play with blocks on her activity mat. "He'll be fantastic. Your voice was destined for such a platform." Richard sat next to her. Richard had become a constant in Emma's and Lily's lives, helping with career decisions, watching Lily during interviews, and even building a proper recording studio in her home. Over the past few months, their relationship had grown beyond friendship, though neither had yet expressed their feelings. Emma looked at him with gratitude. Emma mentioned that Sam called this morning as well, asking me to add 2 additional songs to the set list. "I believe you can create them in time." Emma paused, suddenly uncomfortable. "I've been working on something about finding love when you least expect it." Richard's eyes met hers, and something appeared to shift between them. Before he could answer, Lily broke down in tears. The doorbell rang as Emma was picking up her daughter, and Richard answered it to see Emma's lawyer, Barbara Chen, standing solemnly on the porch. When they were all sat in the living room, Barbara stated, "I have news about Jake Miller. He has applied for partial custody of Lily, but Emma held Lily closer. He's never even met her, but he can try," Barbara explained. "But his argument is weak. He's saying that he should be involved in his daughter's life now that he's stable." Emma remarked sourly, "By stable, he means he saw I'm successful and wants access to money." Richard moved forward. "What's our next step?" Barbara opened her briefcase. "I have drafted a counteroffer that acknowledges his paternity but requires him to pay child support retroactive to Lily's birth and restricts his visitation to supervised sessions at first, with no overnight visits until she is at least 3 years old." Emma questioned, "Do you think he'll agree?" He might reconsider how badly he wants to be a father when he sees the financial obligations, Barbara answered. Men like Jake often disappear again when they realize parenting involves responsibility, not just rights. Richard was going through her music sheets when Barbara left, so Emma put Lily to sleep and came back to find him saying, "Ah, these new songs are beautiful, especially this one." "I found you," Richard replied. "It's honest, like all your best work." And Emma flushed. "It's still rough." "What are we doing?" "What do you mean?" "This us. You're here nearly every day," Emma said cautiously. "Richard, you help me with everything, including Lily and my profession. Are we just friends?" Richard grasped her hand. "And I believe we both understand that we are more than just friends. And now," Emma said quietly, "I'm sick of acting like I don't want to be with you. I've had feelings for you for months, but I didn't want to make things more difficult for you when so much was changing." Emma responded by leaning forward and giving him a gentle kiss. And when they parted ways, they were both grinning. Richard said, "But only if you feel the same way." Richard added, "I wasn't sure if you were ready with everything happening in your career and with Jake." "But I've been ready," Emma said, acknowledging that she had wanted to do that for a long time. "I really didn't want to jeopardize our connection if you didn't share my sentiments." Emma juggled rehearsals, taking care of Lily, and finishing up 2 new songs in the weeks before the Hollywood Bowl performance. Richard helped her through it all, frequently bringing Lily to his place so Emma could concentrate on her singing. Jake Miller showed up at Emma's door without warning 3 days prior to the event. "I want to see my daughter." When Emma replied, he said, "You can't just show up like this." Emma blocked the doorway. "We used to love each other, but now all of our communications go through our lawyers." "Come on, Emma, we don't need lawyers." "Is that her?" "Let me see her." "No, Jake, those are the rules." Jake attempted to peer past her into the house. Jake snarled. "So that's what this is about. You've got yourself a rich boyfriend now." Richard stepped behind Emma, holding Lily. Before we called the police, Richard calmly remarked, "Is that why you won't let me see my kid? You need to leave." Emma fell onto the couch after Jake left. On the day of the concert, Emma stood in her dressing room at the Hollywood Bowl, trying to calm her nerves. What if he shows up at the concert? What if he tries to take Lily? Richard assured her. "Jut, he won't. I've hired security for the event, and Margaret will be with Lily the entire time in a private area backstage." She told her reflection, "I can't do this," as she saw thousands of people crammed into the famous theatre through the window. Her worry was cut short when someone knocked on the door, and Richard, holding Lily, came in, saying someone wanted to wish Mommy good luck. "I'm afraid, Richard, what if I freeze out there? You won't," he said confidently, as Emma grabbed Lily and inhaled her infant aroma. "When did you become so savvy about performing?" Emma asked, smiling slightly. "You were born to do this. Just sing like you're in your living room, sharing your heart with people who want to listen." Richard grasped her hand and said, "I have something to tell you. I've learned a lot from watching you these past months about courage and following your passion. Your tale inspired the Lily Foundation, which just awarded its first 10 awards for single parents pursuing careers in writing, art, and music." Emma's eyes welled up with emotions. "Really? 10 families will receive assistance." Richard assured her that there would be many more in the future. "Your adventure is now benefiting others." When 5 minutes, Ms. Wilson and Margaret showed up to pick up Lily, when a production assistant knocked on the door. She told Emma, "You'll be great. We'll be watching from the wings." Emma, who was left alone with Richard, inhaled deeply. Richard stated, "You were never just anything. You were always extraordinary. I am grateful that you believed in me from the start, even when I was just your maid." He gave her a gentle kiss, and I happened to see, "Now go tell everyone what I already know. The announcer's voice boomed throughout the Hollywood Bowl as Emma stood in the dark backstage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emma Wilson." As Emma stepped onto the stage, the spotlight found her and thousands of people applauded. Emma was momentarily paralyzed by the sheer volume of people, but then she noticed Richard sitting in the front row with Lily on his shoulders, all of them beaming up at her, while Margaret, Antonio and Michael sat next to them, all of them grinning encouragingly. Emma took the microphone and, in spite of her nervousness, stated, "Thank you all for coming tonight. Life can change in unexpected ways." She sang her set list, getting more confident with each song. "A year ago, I was cleaning houses and worried about how I would pay the rent while pregnant with my daughter." She told the audience, "I almost didn't sing that night." The audience responded enthusiastically, with many singing along to "Rise from the Ashes," which had become her signature hit. Emma shared parts of her story between songs, including her dreams of a Nashville music career, becoming a single mother, and the wedding that changed everything. "Because I was pregnant and working as a maid, I was afraid of being judged and viewed as less than." Emma returned to "Rise from the Ashes" for her farewell song, and before she started, she glanced out at the thousands of faces observing her. The whole Hollywood Bowl stood up as Emma sang the last notes, saying, "I want to dedicate this song to anyone who was ever told they didn't belong on stage, whatever stage that may be in your life. Your voice matters, your dreams matter, and sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best beginnings." Richard lifted Lily higher on his shoulders from the front row, pointing up at Emma so the baby could see her mother shining on stage. His heart was full of pride and love for the woman who had come into his life as an employee but had grown into so much more: a partner, an inspiration, and the missing piece of his family. After the show, as fans dispersed and the stage crew started dismantling equipment, Richard went backstage with Lily, sleeping in his arms. She bowed, tears streaming down her face, overcome by the journey that had brought her here. Without waking the infant, he added softly, "You were incredible." "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Emma said, and Richard shook his head. "Your gift is too great to remain concealed. You would have finally found your way." He glanced down at Lily and then back at Emma. "Watching you shine tonight made me realize something. Some people enter our lives as employers, some as employees, but the fortunate ones find something neither of them was seeking: a perfect harmony." Emma leaned forward to kiss him while crying. Knowing that she would face any obstacles head-on, Jake's custody claims, the demands of fame, juggling motherhood and her career, with strength, music, and the family she had unexpectedly found. Don't spend time, simply click on the screen. If you liked today's video, you'll love the following one.